It's hour 2 of Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com, along with Jesse Stiers. I am Sean Stiers. As we roll into the second hour, that can only mean one thing, Jesse, and one thing only. Whiteboard. Talk a little swamp butt on the whiteboard. Fred wants to know if you can bring out the whiteboard to break down the swamp butt.
I don't think anyone wants that.
You're out on that?
I'm out on that one.
Okay. All right.
I am in on today's rapid fire though.
Okay.
There's a lot of good stuff in here. I hope we can put our mouths to all of it.
I think we'll be able to get to it. By the way, we were talking about the weather, the heat.
Man, thanks for backing me up, Fred.
Let's talk about the heat. Fred says 88 in Miami, 63% humidity right now. South Bend, 85 degrees, 57% humidity. Not a lot of difference, is there?
I'm just trying to say, once you get hot, it's hot.
Yes.
Like it's like if you were in a burning fire, it's still hot no matter where you are in that fire.
Yes, exactly.
The only time I think it gets a little bit hotter is when you start playing on a turf field because of the heat that radiates off of that tar rubber on the bottom of the field.
Right.
But I believe that Miami Stadium is a grass field.
It is.
Yeah, and Notre Dame's been practicing on the grass fields. So It's actually going to feel a bit cooler. And a lot of people have pointed out too, it's a 7:30 kickoff, right? Like,
look, this is all the same stuff we were talking about last year. I think any oxygen.
But people love to bring it up.
I know. I think any oxygen we give it is too much oxygen. It's a non-story. It was a non-story last year. It's a non-story this year. Newsflash.
Check the box, though.
Newsflash. It's August 31st. It's still going to be hot no matter where you are in the continental United States. So everyone's going to be playing with some heat those first few weeks of the season. That's how it goes every year. The AP preseason top 25 was released today. Notre Dame checks in at number 6 in the poll. It's Texas at number 1, followed by Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia in the top 5 ahead of the Irish. Do you buy or sell Notre Dame at number 6, Jesse?
I really want to say hold, but I know that you're not going to let me say that because I'm not buying it. I'm not selling it. I went into this last week about how I feel about preseason polls and just kind of how obnoxious they are. And I wish I could bring some of I love to follow Chris Fallica. He used to be the guy on
Bear, right?
Yeah, Bear on
College Game Day
because he's got so many little tidbits about like, there's always at least one team in the top 10 that falls out by the end of the season. There's always a team that jumps into the top 10 that wasn't even ranked at the beginning of the season, right? So I'm going to say sell because I think the only team that's ahead of Notre Dame that shouldn't be is Georgia. And so if we're going by definition, I would have to sell, but I'm completely okay with where Notre Dame is at. And that's why I would ultimately like to go hold because, again, you're going with schematics at this point. If you really want to argue, well, Notre Dame should be ahead of this team and Notre Dame shouldn't be ahead of that team. Like I feel on paper, Georgia has more to replace than Notre Dame does. Notre Dame's been recruiting at the same level as Georgia. Their recruits are having the same impact as Georgia, and they just beat Georgia this past season. But everyone else, I'm completely okay with.
Notre Dame's the only one of the top 7 teams that did not get a first place vote in the AP.
If they had a returning quarterback, they probably would have.
Probably would. And they'd probably, if they had a returning quarterback, they might be a preseason number 1 right now after going to the national championship game last year. As Joe says, Brett McMurphy being Brett McMurphy gave Georgia its only number 1 vote. And that was the difference in Georgia being ahead of Notre Dame instead of behind Notre Dame. The only team in the AP that is ahead of Notre Dame in the preseason poll that was not in the coaches poll last week is Clemson. And I was surprised that Clemson was as low as they were last week because they do have a returning quarterback and they've got all this stuff.
New defensive coordinator. Really good defensive line.
Yeah. Georgia is the team that I've got the biggest problem with. Ohio State, to an extent, I probably have a problem with. They're
still got the best receiver in the country.
They do have the best receiver, but does that make you a great team? I mean, we know they're going to have great athletes because they always do, but their quarterback is just as unproven as Notre Dame's quarterback will be. maybe there's a little bit more talent to the roster. Maybe there's a little bit more, sustained success with Ohio State, so it gets them the benefit of the doubt. But
let me ask
most
you
people
this.
have the. Go ahead.
Do you think that this puts a little bit of chip on Notre Dame's shoulder, or do you think Marcus Freeman's just like, it is what it is? It's a preseason poll, or do you feel like he's maybe been like, these are some teams that you beat. You should feel a little bit disrespected that you're not coming in, or is he so week by week singular focus that I ultimately don't think he cares what these polls say?
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to talk too much about the national rankings and the polls and stuff like that, because you definitely can't do that once you get into the season. So I don't think that I don't think it's going I think his biggest focus is one, getting his team ready, but part of getting his team ready is figuring out who the quarterback is going to be. I think that is the biggest focus that they have right now, is making sure that who they're going to go with at quarterback puts them in the best position to win. And ultimately that's going to justify or not justify whatever preseason ranking you've got. I'm perfectly, again, I realize a lot of people have a biggest issue with Penn State, and there's a lot of back and forth with Notre Dame and Penn State since last year, and I think that just makes it's
healthy,
that much more fun. Yeah. They do have a returning quarterback. They've got a schedule that's very conducive to them, justifying the ranking that they get, and that's going to lead to even more coming from the Penn State side as the season goes along, and all that is fine. At the end of the day, Penn State still has to prove that they can win big games. They haven't done that so far.
Did you see, though, that only 5 points separated Texas and Penn State for the AP poll number 1 position?
Man,
the smallest margin ever in the existence of the AP poll. So I mean that should just tell you, I think, really the top 5, top 6, maybe even top 10, just how talented it is. And you really just get to you start getting into splitting hairs, and it's all about projections and what people think are going to happen. Like, so many things can happen between now and the end of the regular season. I guess a more fun question would be, of the 6 teams, 5 ahead of Notre Dame, who do you think has the biggest chance of falling out of the top 10 by the time the season ends?
By the time out of the top 10?
Out of the top 10.
I might have to go with this. This might sound crazy, but we're talking about falling out of the top 10. Realistically, I don't think any of these teams will. But I think of these teams, Georgia has the greatest chance of not being in the top 10 with what we saw from that quarterback last year, and the fact they've got to play Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, Florida, Texas this year.
Georgia's my pick as well. I think they have a lot of question marks. And you got to remember too, when is Georgia going to take that step back in the portal NIL era? Because we saw Alabama do it. I think that, everyone's kind of seeing this leveling of the playing field. I don't think Georgia has felt that yet, but also they haven't had to replace any kind of key position players yet. And so if this Gunner kid doesn't work out at quarterback, that's a big hole in their team altogether.
Yeah. Just to clarify for a couple guys in the YouTube chat who are answering LSU and Miami, Jesse's question was, of the 5 teams ranked ahead of Notre Dame, which of those had the best chance of falling out of the top 10 by the time the season was over? Because someone said LSU, someone said Miami. Those are teams number 9 and 10 right now, but he was talking about the teams that were ahead of Notre Dame. But yeah, I think that LSU and Miami, if you were just looking at the entire top 10, because the rest of the top 10, Oregon at number 7, Alabama, LSU, Miami.
I'd pick Oregon if that were the group.
A lot of people, I keep seeing a lot of people saying Arizona State is so overrated, and their number.
They get to play in the Big 12,
11
baby.
in both. Yeah, they get to play in the Big 12. And again, other than Scattaboo, they really don't lose very much. Got the entire coaching staff back, got the quarterback. I think it's 17 of 22 starters from last year are back.
what they're doing actually reminds me a lot of Notre Dame. Young head coach, really good, enthusiastic, good recruiter, kind of a foundation builder, program builder. Probably had a little bit of success prematurely, to be honest with you, but also returning a lot of key players on both sides of the ball.
But that's also the benefit of expanding the college football playoff format and being in a winnable conference. Basically, what you had to do is win your conference to get in. They were obviously a one-bid league last year. They made most of it. They got hot. They lost a couple games early, got hot at the right time, and got into the Big 12 championship game and won it. Fill in the blank on this next one. It's blank that Penn State is the most bet upon team to win the Big Ten this season.
It's a double-edged sword. And the reason why I say it's a double-edged sword is because it's a really smart bet, in my opinion. If you look at the whole compilation of what Penn State has on the horizon, a favorable schedule, one of the most talented returning quarterbacks, one of the most talented returning backfields. Obviously, the wide receiver position is going to be a question mark, but they got a lot of guys to transfer in at the wide receiver position. But, are they going to be able to throw the ball to them and efficiently, run an offense that isn't just funneling through a run game and a tight end, essentially. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you could make the argument that they have one of the most, draft-heavy prospects, defensive groups in the entire country. They're getting one of the top defensive coordinators to come in there and play, coach ball. So, it definitely makes sense. But the reason why it's a double-edged sword is James Franklin is still your head coach at the end of the day, and he has not won a monumental game yet. So
20 times yes.
On paper, it seems really good, but then on paper here, you see James Franklin is etched in as head coach. You're like, well, what has this guy done? So
yeah, it is insane that people are wagering money on Penn State to win the Big Ten championship.
The most unproven big game coach in the game.
Right. You're wagering on a coach who has won nothing to win something this year. Like even last, I think they gave Oregon a better game than a lot of people thought that they were going to give them last year because of the fact that Oregon was undefeated.
I didn't think they'd go blow
in.
for blow like that.
Yeah, I didn't either. But James Franklin is still 1-0, and everyone is just pushing so much of their chips in on James Franklin and specifically on Drew Aller as well. Again, this is an experienced quarterback, so I'm not knocking Drew Aller. But, you're absolutely right. They've got him at least a nominally better receiving core than what they had last year, but they also are now missing their most dynamic playmaker from a year ago in Tyler Warren because he's playing in the NFL right now. So, you can have a great offensive line. You can have at least a good quarterback. Again, a lot of people think that he's going to be a first-round draft pick, and you can have a couple of great running backs, but you ultimately have to be able to pass downfield in the biggest games. And that's a big question that they're going to have to answer this year. And again, their schedule is very forgiving. They're going to win a lot of games. But given history between the two, I would be Ohio State is still the favorite. Penn State is the one that people are betting on, though. I would be betting on Ohio State over Penn State right now.
So a couple things, Notre Dame's offense and Penn State's offense have a lot of similarities. Really good offensive lines, really good running backs, kind of unproven wide receiver rooms at the end of the day. But I would give the nod to Notre Dame, even though they have a quarterback who hasn't started a game yet, because I think Mike Denbrock's offense is going to be so much more dynamic and more multiple than anything that Penn State could do on the offensive side of the ball. And then the second part, I guess I would ask you, if you were a betting man, who would you put your preseason future on to win the college football championship?
Oh, wow. Man. To win the national championship?
Yeah, because the question is Penn State's the most has the most money on their handle right now.
To win the Big Ten. To win the Big Ten.
Oh, to win the Big Ten. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Not to win the national championship.
Okay.
To win the Big Ten.
I still want to take it to the national championship level. I would still take Ohio State to win the Big Ten as well, just because I think Ryan Day actually has, knows how to win some games. And they still have some of the best athletes in the country. But if we're talking national championship, I
think it's too wide open. I would not want to wager on any. And this, this goes back to the whole, the polls and the rankings and the whole thing. Like, it is very wide open. Any of these, I think, especially those top 7 teams down to Oregon. I think that one of those 7 teams, Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Notre Dame, Oregon, I think one of them is going to win the national championship. I don't think Alabama will. I don't think LSU will. I don't think Miami will go on down the line. I don't think anyone past that. Like if would you feel comfortable those 7 teams against the field, basically?
I would. I'll take it a step further. The 3 teams I feel the best about, Texas, Clemson, and Notre Dame.
Texas, Clemson, Notre Dame. Okay. I just don't feel confident enough in any one team right now to be wagering anything when we haven't seen any of them play a game, because of the fact that, okay, we've seen a little bit of Arch Manning. We haven't seen Julian Sayin. We've seen just a little bit of Gunnar Stockton. Like, I would actually probably, again, I would push Georgia a little bit farther down the line. Maybe they've got some things figured out. Maybe Stockton is a lot different quarterback than what he showed himself to be in the Sugar Bowl last year. But there are enough questions with most of the, like, it's amazing how many of these top 10 teams have first-year starting quarterbacks this year.
I just think it's the expectation at some of these places now. You're a top program, having and this should really be kind of the mindset, I think, for everyone, especially Notre Dame fans, is it's just the next guy up. At some point you got to cycle through to the next quarterback, but there really should be no letdown in that level of play. Yeah, there might be a couple of stumbling blocks early on in the season here and there, but nothing egregious at the end of the day.
I think you're right. Derek in the YouTube chat says, I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State loses 3 regular season games. They won't be as good as they were last year. Here's the problem that I've got with that argument. You could be right. I still think they're going to be really good, because they do have so much back from last year, including Aller and the 2 running backs. But the problem is their schedule, because as we've said over and over again, these Big Ten teams, and the Big Ten in general, tries to make out like they're playing a murderer's row. Here's Penn State's schedule: Nevada, Florida International, Villanova, Oregon. Okay, you've got Oregon, your first tough game. They're going to start off 3-0. Then they'll have Oregon, UCLA, Northwestern, at Iowa, at Ohio State, Indiana, at Michigan State, Nebraska, at Rutgers. Do you see 3 losses there? I mean, I see 2. Do you see 3, though?
No, I don't see 3. I mean, obviously their toughest 4, in my opinion, are Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, and Iowa, probably, right? I think Iowa and Ohio State back-to-back weeks is going to be a little bit tough. I think they probably split somewhere in there. But seeing a second loss, I just don't think Oregon is going to get to Penn State, especially that early on in the season. Penn State's going to play very physical football, and I just don't think Oregon's going to have the resources ready to kind of air them out and run and gun like they did in that Big Ten championship game last year. I just think Penn State is going to be who they are, and that's who they're going to be from game 1 to game 12. And I think Oregon kind of has, more to figure out at the end of the day. But I will say, and I was thinking about this the other day, as much as people probably dislike Ohio State, and I'm up there on that chart. I live in Ohio. I have to be around the Bucknuts 24/7, but in comparison to Penn State, Ohio State and their out of conference schedule is very respectable every season. They've played Notre Dame, they've played Texas. I mean, they're going to play Texas. I think they've played Oregon before Oregon was even in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Like, everyone else in the Big Ten seems to want to complain, but Ohio State steps up to the freaking plate every year and plays at least one tough out of conference game. So I give respect to Ohio State at the end of the day.
No, for that I will, for actually challenging yourself in the non-conference, because obviously Penn State's not going to, Indiana's not going to. We know that, but really they can do that because when you look at their conference schedule, it's it comes down to these games. Minnesota is going to be good. It's still going to be Minnesota versus Ohio State. Illinois is going to be good. It's still going to be Illinois versus Ohio State. Penn State and Michigan. That's what the conference schedule is going to come down to for Ohio State. But you're absolutely right. Like, if we're going to rip all these other Big Ten teams for not challenging themselves in the non-conference, you have to at least give it to Ohio State for being the team in the conference that is willing to challenge themselves. Michigan is as well. I mean, they're going to Oklahoma this year, and so credit where credit is due, whether you like those teams or not. But I'm sitting here looking at Michigan's conference schedule. I don't think any of us expects them to challenge for championships, but yeah. All right. So we talked to Notre Dame offensive line coach Joe Rudolph recently, and I asked him about tackles Anthonie Knapp and Aamil Wagner, who both went into last season with no experience, and what the 31 combined starts they got last year means for them in the Fighting Irish offensive line this year.
Both those guys, they fought really hard to get their spots, right? It wasn't like a no-brainer coming into camp that's where they would be, and in spring ball especially before then. And I think they kind of embraced that attitude. I got to keep fighting to get there. But now when you talk, you can't lose anything from the fundamental aspects, but you can kind of add a layer of understanding to things that we got to in the year, but I think things that we can really come out of camp and have a better grasp of. So those two have been great to work with.
So there's Joe Rudolph, Notre Dame's offensive line coach. So let me ask you, Jesse, are we overestimating or underestimating what the experience those two got last year will mean this season?
I think honestly we're underestimating it at the end of the day, because these guys were not true freshmen, but guys.
One was a true freshman.
One was a true freshman, and both were obviously not starters. So last year was their first season going in, and they still played and competed at a very high level. And I think that a lot of people were down on Knapp and his pass blocking abilities, and rightfully so. But he stepped up to the plate and he got the job done at the end of the day. And same with Aamil Wagner. And I think getting that first year under your belt, no matter how talented you are, how skilled you are, you're going to be better your second year. I think back to, kind of like when I was a sophomore in high school and I was a starting linebacker on defense. I had a solid year. I was an all-conference guy, but the leap I took between sophomore and junior year was what felt astronomical. And I feel like that's kind of what you're going to see with these two guys is they now have their feet underneath them, and there's just more comfort and confidence in who they are as a player. They're no longer the young, talented guy who's out there, and everyone's kind of, got the spotlight on waiting for him to mess up. I think there's just going to be so much more confidence in their gameplay this season. And so I think we're underestimating it, because I think they're going to be stridefully better, each of them this season, and be kind of those guys that you can just rely on and consistently rely on, and not be, oh, here's Anthonie Knapp again, against Texas A&M. Where is he going to mess up, or is one of these edge rushers going to get by him?
Tommy's asking a good question in the chat. What are you looking up at?
I don't know.
You've got a computer monitor right in front of you. Just lock in. Look at the monitor. There you go. Peek in. You probably don't remember. It was a few years back. Brian Kelly did. It was like the Thursday Zoom thing, and he was like looking up, and he's kind of doing what you're doing, looking up at the sky. I think that you're absolutely right. I think we are underestimating it, because if this was a quarterback,
oh man,
all we would be talking about is all this experience that he got last year, and the next step that this offense is going to take as a result. And we forget, I think, that after the quarterback, Yeah, I think that after the quarterback, the two most, the next most important position on the offense is the left tackle, and the one after that is probably the right tackle. And both of these guys were baptized by fire last year. They were thrown into the fire. And again, as
sink or swim.
Yeah, as Joe Rudolph said, they earned their spot. It's not because remember, it was basically Anthonie Knapp and Tosh Baker competing for that spot. And remember, how mortified most people were that Tosh Baker might end up being the left tackle, and then just like kind of snowballed after Anthonie Knapp ended up getting in, and it's turned into a completely different narrative. But as I've said a million times, we never talked about Aamil Wagner last year because he was probably the most consistent guy they had out there, with all the injuries that they had and with all the other things that were going on that they had to deal with on the offensive line and piecing things together. Aamil Wagner was Mr. Consistency out there. And again, now you've got 31 combined starts at the second and third most important positions on the offensive side of the ball. And I think it's completely taken for granted. Like this offensive line is going to be legit. And I think that, like most people just think of kind of like Christian Gray. People just think of the worst moment and apply that to everything for Anthonie Knapp as well. But the guy played better than he played bad last year. Were there things that he needed to work on? Yeah, but he was also a true freshman who wasn't, even strong enough to be able to, completely play that position the way that he needed to. And like that has been a big difference that we've seen in camp so far. So I think it's completely underestimated. So Jon Gruden recently did a Notre Dame unboxing that you might have seen. We didn't get a chance to get to this at the end of Friday's show. So some of the things in the box. What's in the box? Have you ever seen Seven, by the way?
I think so.
Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt.
Yes.
Yeah, two detectives. What's in the box? Well, there was a lot of stuff in Jon Gruden's box. I went through and I did his Zapruder film on this. You had a gray sweatshirt with a leprechaun on the front, pair of white Under Armour shoes. There was a charcoal gray hoodie with a "Play Like a Champion" on the back, Notre Dame on the front, couple of blue caps, couple of white caps, cool leather notebook binder with a Wilson football on the outside. I thought that looked pretty cool.
Sharp.
Notre Dame shower slides. There was a Yeti cooler with a leprechaun on it. And then, as if the cooler wasn't cool enough, he opens it up and there's a helmet inside.
A game helmet.
Like, do you think there's a little note that says, be sure to open the cooler because there's a helmet inside?
It's like as a kid when you open everything up thinking there's another present inside the present.
Yeah, exactly. There was a blue Under Armour polo with a leprechaun, leather wallet with a leprechaun, a lot of leprechauns, understandably. Gray Under Armour windbreaker suit, the Under Armour t-shirt with Irish on the front, a green Under Armour t-shirt, a gray hoodie, another gray sweatshirt, a blue t-shirt with a gold leprechaun. I think I got it all. That box, though, Jesse, is blank.
That box is ridiculously cool, but ridiculously expensive at the end of the day. That has to be the most expensive box I've ever seen. Like, seriously, all of those items probably are at least $100, right? Because like an Under Armour sweatshirt isn't cheap. I'm sure everyone in the chat knows that. So
yeah,
that box had to be probably close to like $5,000, I would imagine, of just stuff inside of it, right? And so it is every fan's dream that box just shows up on their front porch and they get to keep everything that's inside that box. Like everything that he kept opening, I was like, man, that's sweet. Man, that's sweet. Man, that's sweet. And then I know everyone's gonna say too, like, I'm on the same boat. I haven't seen half of that apparel before.
Yeah, I know, right? That box was Christmas Day for like 10 families is what it was. Like, I would have, all he had to do was stop with the Yeti cooler as far as I was concerned. And then, like you said, he pulls that helmet.
If I were not being greedy, I would want the cooler, the Wilson notebook binder, and the helmet. I could have stopped at those three things.
I think so as well. I would go and I would go cooler. Yeah, I would go cooler notebook. I would probably go cooler notebook helmet. Helmet would be number 3 for me.
I think helmet would be number one for me. I would love to have just like a helmet in my desk area, or, especially as I grow up into the ranks and have my own official office. You walk in, you just see the big, shiny Notre Dame gold helmet in there. People immediately know probably who I am as a person as soon as they see that.
They know who you are as a person when they see your shiny helmet. Huh?
Correct. Or at least have an inkling of who I am.
By the way, I started this up earlier, and I just remembered that this is still in here from Joseph in the YouTube chat. And don't forget, of course, you can watch the show live on YouTube at either the Irish Breakdown YouTube channel or the Sports Radio WSBT YouTube channel. And you can interact with us in the show, just like Joseph and many others. But he said he was listening to a Miami Hurricane-centric podcast recently. Both hosts were expressing their deep hatred of Notre Dame. Putting the 85 disaster aside, why do Miami fans hate Notre Dame so much? I mean, I don't know how old these guys were. I mean, there's a lot of general hatred for Notre Dame, obviously. And I wonder how much of this, again, depending on age, I wonder how much of it has to do with the Catholics versus convicts thing. Because if you watch that 30 for 30, you've watched the Catholics versus convicts 30 for 30, right?
Yep.
Like, do you remember how butthurt all those Miami people were about just you hurt our feelings because you called us convicts and all that kind of stuff? Like, I wonder how much of that plays into it.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, they probably thought Notre Dame took a couple, at least a national championship away from them. I know that during that time, Miami had a really good regular season win streak that I think Notre Dame snapped as well. So, I think that I don't think they enjoyed being depicted as the bad guy convicts and that Notre Dame was this angelic Catholic, couldn't do anything wrong type scenario. Like, but you can't control how the public is painting you out to be. And it was just a great kind of headline to put onto a really good in the moment heated rivalry.
I've been waiting to get into this question for a little bit, and it is here now. Drew Brees is going to be the game analyst for one of the Christmas Day NFL games on Netflix this year. He hasn't done a game of any kind for more than 3 years since he bombed in the NBC booth doing a playoff game between the Bengals and Raiders. You might remember a few years back. Mike Tirico was with him. That was the year he was doing Notre Dame home football games as well with Tirico for NBC. So Brees was on the Dan Patrick Show recently, and Dan asked him about his broadcasting career. Interesting answer Drew Brees had. Take a listen.
You want to do this, and you're a competitor, and you want to be great. What is it that maybe you missed understanding or doing the first go-round of your broadcasting career?
Well, here's where I kind of chuckled, Dan, because I get the perception. I get the feeling that the perception is that somehow, I failed at being a broadcaster. I got 2 opportunities to broadcast NFL games, and they were like 8 weeks apart. I did one game in New Orleans for Thanksgiving, and I did one playoff game. Otherwise, I broadcasted Notre Dame football. But really, when I took that job with NBC, the idea was to work with some of the best people in the business, the Mike Tirico, Tony Dungy, Rob Hyland, like Fred Gaudelli, all the guys that are legendary guys in that organization. And, man, I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity. But at the same time, what I really did for the most part was sit behind a desk and do Sunday Night Football, the Sunday Night Football Night in America, and then, a bunch of stuff in stadium at the desk, and then the Super Bowl broadcast, but again, at the desk. So at the end of the day, like I chuckle because even as I look at the landscape right now, man, I have so much respect for a lot of guys in the booth right now. But I'd step in the booth right now and be a top 3 guy, like without question. And then you give me a few years and I could be the best. So look, I love the game. I love talking about the game. I feel like I have an insight to the game that is pretty unique, given my playing experience. I see the game a totally different way. I process it a different way. And so even as I watch games now and I just kind of listen to, the commentary and this and that and what I'm seeing, I just feel like there's so much more to add.
All right, Jess, what do you think of that answer from Drew Brees?
So we got 3 minutes
exactly.
to get into this. So let's, I'll try to be concise here. I just think I am quite honestly flabbergasted to say that he was not that bad and then to say in the next sentence that I could go on and be top 3, if not the best.
He said he would be top 3 right now if he was doing NFL games right now.
That is insanity. That is insane. And I just think that is so disrespectful to the Joe Bucks, the Troy Aikmans, like the people who have been doing this for a very long time, who have made a career of this, to say, I could jump back in after bombing it.
Right.
And be top 3 right now. But still, he was done wrong in some way, that he was let down or failed and really wasn't as bad as everyone is making him out to be.
Right. Right. And he went on to say, basically, he left NBC by his own accord. He wasn't asked to leave and whatever else. Okay. I mean, I guess that's maybe that's true, but there is just zero self-awareness. He's basically, this is like the typical, I'm a quarterback who's won a Super Bowl. He's probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame. I was great. I was a great quarterback. So of course I'm a better broadcaster than any of these guys. Like, I just wasn't given enough of a chance to show it. Like, he got his chances because, he basically brushed aside those Notre Dame games that he was doing because he's saying, well, I should have been doing more NFL games to begin with. Right. I shouldn't have had to do Notre Dame games. Well, did you not take the Notre Dame games seriously enough? Because those were reps, those were opportunities to get better, so that when you got into that NFL booth, which is obviously what he wanted to do, not everyone gets to start off on that stage. Like, he didn't give any critical analysis of himself. He basically just said, I'm great. I would be top 3 right now.
I wasn't the problem.
No way. Yeah, I wasn't the problem. There's no way he would be top 3 right now, because Tony Romo and Greg Olsen, at the very least, are both better than him. And and Troy Aikman is better than him. So there's 3 right now. You can obviously make the argument against Tom Brady because he wasn't great in his first season, but there are 3 guys, those 3 guys I just mentioned, Aikman, Romo, and Olsen. There's no way Drew Brees would be better than them. And he's not better than most of the rest of the guys doing analysis in the NFL right now.
This makes me respect Tom Brady, which is a crazy statement to say, because Tom Brady at least took it seriously and understood where he was at, right? And like, I would take Tom Brady over Drew Brees right now.
Yeah. Drew Brees in that NFL game, that playoff game that he was, just got ripped apart for, which he deserved. He was just unwilling to be critical at all of, any borderline officiating. And there were a lot of, borderline officiating things that he had a chance. He was decent with quarterback analysis, but in general, he was just like, he was not willing to be critical. I wish we could go on. We can pick it up again tomorrow. If
we need Vince's input as well.
I think you're right. So that's going to do it for tonight. We will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you as always. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.